Good morning and welcome to Daily Tanya. Today is Sunday, the 5th day of Adar. Let's begin with Tzedakah, Gedola, Tzedakah, Shemekareves, Esageula. Today we start chapter 31 in the Tanya. And here the Alter Rebbe teaches us how to leverage the sadness and turn it into good. Because as you remember, the Alter Rebbe spoke about the importance of happiness. It is important to be besimcha anytime. And that's the only way to serve Hashem. And simcha itself is serving God. Being happy is being godly, being selfless. Sadness in general comes from a selfish feeling. You think about yourself more. But as you remember in the last few chapters, the Alter Rebbe discussed how the Alter Rebbe deals with many different situations, all types of scenarios, how a person needs to be guided and helped in serving God, and talking about people who are very high level, and yet sometimes they have a feelings of dullness of the heart. They don't feel, they don't sense, their heart is unresponsive to godliness. And for that, the Alter Rebbe said that it is important to crush the self-ego. And he gave different things to think about, to talk about how low you are and comparing yourself to others, how you are much lower than the lowest of the low, and that will bring a person to brokenheartedness, and thereby it will open up his heart to sense more godliness, spirituality. But here the Alter Rebbe says that doing this might put you in danger. You're entering a very dangerous territory. What is the danger? If you're going to be harsh on yourself, if you're going to be criticizing yourself, thinking how low you are, that might lead you into sadness. And sadness is the worst enemy. We shouldn't be sad. So the Alter Rebbe is going to say, first of all, again, as we mentioned many times, what the Rebbe said, that our generation, we need to focus not on the being sad and being embittered. Our generation's job is to focus on what we need to do next, and what we do with simcha, with happiness, with joy. But yet, Alter Rebbe still talks about when a person should feel bad about the things, the not good things that he has done, his spiritual state that may not be as perfect. So the Alter Rebbe says that this is something that you can do in special times, and don't worry about the fact that you may have some feeling of sadness temporarily, because ultimately that will lead you to true simcha, true joy. Yes, it gives us the advice how we're supposed to do it in the specific times. You have to control it. But then the Alter Rebbe also talks about that when a person finds himself or herself in a sad state of mind anyway, here we have an opportunity to switch it around, to leverage that sadness. And as we will explain as we go along in today's class. So let's start. We'll see inside what the Alter Rebbe says, and we'll get wiser very soon. Says the Alter Rebbe, והנה, אף אם כשיאריך 4 להעמיק בעניונים הנזכורים לעיל כשו 2, ליויס בנמיכס לב ורוח, בנמיכס רוח ולב נשבר, יבוא לידי עצבוס גדולה. לא יוחש. Even if dwelling long and deeply on the above mentioned matters for an hour or two, to be lowly of spirit and contrite of heart, So this leads one to profound depression, sadness. So the Alter Rebbe, let him not be perturbed. Don't be concerned about it. Don't worry about it, the fact that you will feel a feeling of sadness. Even though he says sadness is something which comes from the other side, from not the holy side. True atzvus, depression, derives from the realms of klipas noiga. Klipas noiga is the shell, the other side. Noiga, of course, means the neutral shell, for something that can be turned around into goodness. But still, it's not from the holiness, because holiness is happiness. For concerning the realm of holiness, it is written, strength and gladness are in his place. And there's another statement that says, the divine presence abides only in man's joy. When a person is happy, that's what it says. The prophets, in order to get prophecy, they needed to be in a state of joy and happiness. They would have people playing the violin, the musical instruments, to get them in a place of happiness. Because again, happiness is holiness. Because holiness is about not about self. It's about transcending oneself, connecting to Hashem. That is true happiness. And that is true in life also. When you focus on yourself, that doesn't bring you happiness. You focus on what you do, what you accomplish. You focus on others. This brings true up happiness. And the same joy is required for study of halacha. So he says, the sadness doesn't come from a good side, it comes from the other side. However, if the sadness comes from a spiritual matter, it comes from the good side of the klipa. Any depression then comes from the realm of klipas noiga, except that if the depression is due to spiritual matters arising from one's realization of his spiritual failings, it stems from the good contained in the klipas noiga. Because we mentioned before, the klipas noiga is the neutral klipa that conceals the good, the godliness, but it has an ability to elevate and to transform it into good. V'lachein kosav Arizal, says the Alter Rebbe, that's why the Arizal writes, she'afilu daigas ha'avonos eino re'uyo ki'im b'shas avidei. The Arizal writes, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the famous Kabbalist, he writes that even worry over one's sins is appropriate only during confession. When you're middle of praying, middle of studying, you don't think about the spiritual failings. Don't get depressed. Don't get sad. When you ask confession, you ask Hashem to forgive you for the sins. This is when you feel bad about it, but not when you study or pray. But not during prayer and Torah study. These must be conducted with a joy deriving exclusively from the realm of holiness, as opposed to frivolity and the like. So then the question is, so why are we saying that one should crush his ego and get himself to a point to think that he's lower than others in order to, when a person has this dullness of the heart? Isn't that a danger that is going to lead the person to sadness? Says the Alter Rebbe that sometimes you need it. Sometimes you need to fight the fire with fire. The selfishness, the sadness that the animal soul feels you need to fight it by using that same attribute of sadness and to change it and to transform the person through feeling sad about those things, about the spiritual things. Says the Alter Rebbe, Afal Pekein Arikachi Amido LaKafi LeSitra Achra B'Mina V'Degmasa. Yet this is precisely the method of humbling the Sitra Achra, the other side, through something of its own species and kind. Meaning that the Sitra Achra is most effectively attacked by utilizing the good contained within it as a weapon against itself. And the Alter Rebbe says what the Kemaimer Azal, as our sages expressed it, it says, from the forest itself comes the handle for the axe which fells the forest. You want to chop down a tree, you're taking a piece of wood to use as a handle for the axe to chop down the tree. You take the wood to chop down the tree. Another expression, he encountered one of its own kind. This is, the Gemara says about the prophet Ovadia, but he was the prophet that came from the nation of Adam, and his prophecy was about crushing down the Edomites. Now, of this sadness resulting from contemplation of one's spiritual state, this type of sadness, it says, it is written that in every sadness there will be profit. What is the profit from the sadness? The profit is the joy that follows. The profit is the joy which follows the sadness, as will be explained later. Okay, little come on. Now, having said that, says that the Alter Rebbe now goes on to the next step in saying that really, yes, we were talking about sadness, that the sadness has a good benefit, as we can profit the joy that comes following the sadness. But the truth of the matter, says the Alter Rebbe, that we need to differentiate between sadness and merirus. Merirus is embitterness. What does it mean? Sadness is when you're shut down. You're sad, you're depressed, has no life to it. That is total bad. Comes from the evil side. Merirus means when a person feels bad about the situation, but it is full of energy and life. He feels bad, but he wants to change. He wants to do something about it. He says that what we're talking about is not really sadness. We're talking about the merirus. Says the Alter Rebbe, be'emes ein leiv nishber merirus hanefesh al richuka me'ir pnei Hashem v'yislapshuso b'sitra acha nikroim b'shem atzos klal b'loshen hakodesh. In truth, however, the state of being contrite of heart and bitter of soul, remorseful over one's remoteness from God, and over the fact that one's soul is clothed in the sitra acha, this can by no means be described in Hebrew, in the Holy Tongue, by the term atzvus. That's not called atzvus. Atzvus is sadness. Atzvus is depression, melancholy. Merirus is a very different. It says ki atzvus is sheliba metumtum ka'evan ve'ein chayes b'liboi. Atzvus means that one's heart is as dull as a stone, and that there is no vitality. There's no energy there. It's dead in his heart. But bitterness, merirus, and contrition are just the opposite. Since the very fact that one is moved to be embittered is itself a sign of life. The person is moved, he wants to change. However, this is the energy that is rooted, that is the root and source of the klipa, which has this negative energy, this severity, and what we need to do, says the Alter Rebbe, we need to change it with its own kind, using that energy, and to sweeten those negative feelings. It says, except that this vitality derives from the holy attribute of severity, gevuros, and it is therefore expresses itself as bitterness. Whereas the joy derives from the holy attributes of kindness, because the heart contains both these attributes, kindness and severity. Says the Alter Rebbe, at times one must arouse the holy attribute of severity, the gevuros, in order to temper stern judgments, to sweeten the stern judgments, which in this context denote the animal soul and the evil inclination. Whenever it dominates a man, God forbid, and he says, because stern judgment, meaning restraint and one's spiritual well-being, can only be sweetened by means of their source. He says, this is why our sages tell us that one should always incite the good inclination to anger against the evil inclination. So what does it mean is always should do it? That means whenever he sees it necessary. Since anger stems from the attribute of severity, it is capable of sweetening the evil inclination. This means whenever he finds it necessary for himself. And now, the Alter Rebbe concludes here saying that really the opportune time to do this is when a person finds himself anyway in a sad state. If you find yourself in a little down, then use this opportunity out and change the sadness which is not a good thing, comes from, you're sad from material things, and change it on focusing on your spiritual state. And what is the benefit? The Rebbe explains that the benefit is that it is much easier to come from to shift from the sadness, the negative sadness, to positive sadness, and from there leads you to joy, because once you do this, it helps you to joy. It's much harder to shift from sadness to joy, make this big leap. The Rebbe speaks about it, for example, he mentions the simcha, why we need, it says in the time of after the temple was destroyed, it says during the temple we need to do simcha by bringing the offering in the Beis Hamikdash of the holy temple. But once the temple is destroyed, it says ein simcha ela b'basar, ein simcha ela b'yayin. The simcha, the happiness, comes when you eat meat and you drink wine. And the question is that the kind of joy that we want? Don't we want some spiritual joy? And the Rebbe explains that we are a godly soul living in an animal soul. We have a body, an animal soul, and the godly soul wants to be happy, wants to be joyous. When comes a holiday, when comes a Yom Tov, and you get yourself in the mood of joy, then the godly soul is easier for the godly soul to get itself to the state of spiritual joy by the fact that the body will be happy. You have the simcha of the joy that you're putting yourself into the state of joy. You're able to shift from that joy, material joy, into a spiritual joy. And the same thing is on the other side. When a person, when a person is sad, and you hear some terrible thing that happened, someone, you'll start crying. But why? Because you're sad anyway. So it's easier to shift to get you to feel the sadness of the situation. But when a person is in a state of happiness and hears the terrible news, yeah, it's not necessarily he's gonna be able to shift from the happiness into the sadness. And the same thing is the other way around. When you hear good things and you're in a bad situation, it's not so easy to shift from the sadness into the happiness. But when you're sad anyways, to shift from the negative sadness, from stupid sadness, to take this sadness that you feel and leverage that sadness, and to start focusing, wait a second, I'm sad, let me think. Do I have a real reason to be sad? Is this something that maybe I can fix? Maybe I should be in a better state in my connection with Hashem? And that when you shift the sadness into a positive sadness, that helps to elevate you, to break the sitra achra, to fight the fire with the fire of the negativity with fire. And then ultimately what we'll learn tomorrow, how this will lead us to true joy. So it finishes and concludes the Alter Rebbe here. However, the appropriate time for this anger of the divine soul at the animal soul, meaning the time which is opportune and fitting for most people, this is when one is in any case depressed over mundane matters, or just so without any cause. A person just feels down. Says the Alter Rebbe, that is the opportunity to change it and to use this and to leverage it into a positive, into holiness. This is an opportune time for redirecting the depression towards spiritual matters, to be among the masters of accounts, as mentioned above, to think about your actions, and to fulfill the teachings of our sages that one should always incite his good inclination against his evil inclination. And he will thus also be rid of the depression brought on by the mundane matters. When you're redirecting into a positive thing, that will help you to climb out of your depression. And tomorrow, as we said, we will learn how this will lead us also to true joy, to true simcha. Have a wonderful day.